So we have to stall for a few moments, everyone, for the sake of live television. So I think if we can just be patient here for just a couple of minutes, I promise we will start live on Denver 7 in about 5 minutes. Is that right? Yes. So bear with us just for a few minutes. We want to just coordinate carefully. So breathe, I think is the word, yes?
Do you have everything you need?
That was a good timing.
It's coming down to us. Where are the cameras? Oh, they're over there. Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's great. You're perfectly blinded. The first question for tonight's debate will be, what is your favorite beer?
Yes. We started. I'd say a Belgian Belgian.
Ooh, a fresh ground pale ale.
And we do have 3 minutes, by the way. So you can stretch out that answer.
I do read it out here for the Denver Post too. It's a little more fun than, politics sometimes. Ooh, Amber Ale, classic Colorado beer. Now you'll just be homers turning this into politics.
And Jared, we're holding back on this.
Oh, it's really great. So I don't know if I can name. My dad is Heineken. I guess New Belgium Brewery. I touted on the campaign trails being 100% employee owned, and the Bells is too. So we like those ESOPs that reward their workers.
Very politically answered. Taste is also important. Just yeah.
We could move on to dogs. Favorite dogs? We have 2 minutes yet. About a pie. Oh, that's good. Anyone else? 1 minute, everyone. Seconds, and thank you for your patience, everyone. We'll get started in a moment. live on the University of Denver campus. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Ann Trujillo of Denver 7, the Denver Post, and the Center on American Politics at the University of Denver are partnering tonight to bring you this very special debate. It's the final set of debates before next Tuesday's primary election here in Colorado. And tonight we are focused on the Democrats, and I am moderating tonight alongside Denver Post political reporter John Craig.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
All right, before we begin, let's introduce the candidates. Mike Johnston, a state senator with a background in education.
Love the state from up here and feel like we have the chance to continue to lead the country. I think I've had the chance to serve in the legislature the last several years and found there are a lot of big problems we're able to take on and help solve together, but there are a lot of big problems I think still facing over the next decade.
Carrie Kennedy, a woman who's managed taxpayer dollars at the state and local level.
People really look to Colorado as an innovative, forward-looking, modern state. So it's been a real pleasure for me to be a part of the leadership that has helped bring that progress here to Colorado.
Donna Lynn, the healthcare executive who currently serves as lieutenant governor.
It is a complicated state, and it's intricate, and every day I'm on the front line of making decisions, of driving change, and I think that is a prerequisite for being able to do this job.
Jared Polis, a U.S. representative from Boulder and self-made millionaire.
I spend a lot of time hearing concerns from constituents, trying to address them, working with them on their veterans benefits, on immigration issues, really roll up our sleeves. Let's make it work for stuff.
First, the rules for tonight's debate. The order the candidates will answer the questions was predetermined by a random draw. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer each question and 30 seconds for a rebuttal when needed and determined by the moderators. All of the candidates have asked that we call them by their first names tonight. We have asked our audience here at DU to remain silent for the duration of the debate, holding all applause until the end. Anne has our first question.
All right, and we begin with immigration. It is now Trump administration policy to separate some young children from their families if they illegally cross the U.S.-Mexican border. Today, Governor Hickenlooper signed an executive order to ban state agencies from supporting such separation if the only violation is related to immigration. As governor, what will be your policy toward those immigrants, and how will you respond if we lose federal money over immigration policy? And Jared Polis, you're first.
You know, as a father, I look in absolute horror at when under orders from the Trump administration, our own government is removing 1-year-old, 2-year-old kids from their loving parents who are trying to escape their home countries to make a new life in our country, just as my great-grandparents did. I am glad that Governor Hickenlooper took an important step and said that no state resources would be used to separate families. And that stands in stark contrast to Republican frontrunner Walker Stapleton, who said that he would send the Colorado National Guard to the border to actually enforce Trump's orders. I think it's important as governor to send an inclusive tone for the state. I founded a school that's helped serve new immigrants across the metropolitan area. I was an original sponsor of comprehensive immigration reform in the House of Representatives. You know, as governor, I'll make sure that Colorado doesn't stand idly by and allow these acts of terror to be committed in our name, separating 1- and 2-year-old kids from their loving parents.
And I think the question was, what will be your policy toward those immigrants, and how will you respond if we lose federal money over immigration policy?
We should be a welcoming state for immigrants, so we're not going to let our how we address newcomers to Colorado be set by Donald Trump's policies out of Washington. As governor, I'll stand against Donald Trump, as I have in Congress, as I will in governor, to make sure that we're a welcoming state for new arrivals and for those of us already here.
Ms. Lynn, same question?
Great, thank you. I think the word reprehensible probably is even too mild to describe what's going on. I spent my morning with the governor and his team working on this executive order, as well as the press response, and actually meeting with some folks who had gathered in the Capitol. I think we've got to also talk about DACA, and these things, as you know, are being linked, and I would fight that fight. And when it comes to losing federal money, I'm willing to take that risk. This is tearing apart families. I'm a single mother. I had a tough time in my life raising children. I can only imagine for people who are trying to seek asylum, who are trying to do the right thing for their families, how this will do. And I will stand with them on this and other issues as we go forward.
Carrie, same question to you. What was your policy?
John, we can't tolerate the violation of human and civil rights. What we're seeing the Trump administration do on the border today, where they are removing children from their parents, it violates basic human decency. We are better than that. You will see me as governor oppose any policies that tear families apart. You will see me defend the legal rights of immigrants, including our DACA students who are here. I'm married to an immigrant. My husband came to this country when he was 7 years old. We need to stand up and not just defend the legal rights of immigrants, but recognize and value the tremendous accomplishments and contributions that they make in our communities every single day. You will see me fight the Trump administration policies that are tearing families apart and, quite frankly, making our communities less safe. Local law enforcement shouldn't have anything to do with enforcing federal immigration policy.
Mike Johnson?
Thank you. And I think the tragedy of yesterday for all of us is for those of us who got to spend yesterday's Father's Day, the best part of the day other than the scrawl of little cards is the moment when you get all three of your kids to pile up on your lap and you sit down on the couch and you can just be with them. And you think about what it would be like in that moment to have an armed guard wearing our flag on your shoulder come and rip one of those kids out of your arms. You think about how your world would collapse in that moment, the way that the unarmed man committed suicide. His world collapsed. This is why elections matter. And this is why this race is so critical. Because we're going to need someone who has the courage and the clarity to stand up in moments. And here the question is not if we're going to restore Americans' greatness, it's if we're going to defend America's fundamental goodness. And so that is why I got into politics in the first place, because I had students who were undocumented who were trying to get access to college, and I was fighting for the in-state tuition. I helped sponsor driver's licenses, and that's why I said I will not, as governor, allow Colorado to be the hands to implement the wishes of Donald Trump's cold heart. So we will not use state resources to detain them, to transport them, or to deport them.
Real quickly, Donna, would you declare Colorado a sanctuary state?
You know, we've looked at this issue, and we don't even know what the definition of sanctuary state is. It's a nuance that I think many people have, but I think defending the rights of the immigrants who live here, making sure, as we did today, that there are no state resources allocated to this are important things. I think sanctuary state is a amorphous term that we've got to come to grapple with.
So that sounds like a no then?
I think it's a no because we don't know what it means, but certainly the theory behind defending the rights of people who are here is absolutely something that I agree with.
Same question to you, Carrie. Would you declare Colorado a sanctuary state?
Yeah, again, nobody's defined that term, so without a definition, the answer is no. But we absolutely have to make sure that immigrants who are living in our community are part of our community, and they can go to local officials, local law enforcement, the local courthouse, they can take their kids to school, they can take their kids to the library, they can go pick up their paycheck without fear of deportation. We need to make sure that our communities are safe, and safe for everyone, to call the police, report child abuse, report domestic violence. We want immigrants to feel safe in their communities, and that's the way we're going to keep this state safe from fear and safe from the kind of intimidation that we see coming out of the Trump White House.
Mike?
So I can't answer this. We do know what a sanctuary state is. The question is what we believe the state should or shouldn't do to share information with ICE. And I met with Adi Sella this week, who's one of the women who is seeking sanctuary right now in Park Hill. And I think the answer on this is what we ought not to do is share information anytime someone gets a busted taillight or a traffic ticket or any regular everyday occurrences that any of us can get on the way to take our kids to school or to the public library. There's no reason for the state to share that information with ICE, and I would not do it. In the small number of circumstances where you have someone that has committed murder or has committed violent sexual assault, there is then a federal question about who charges that person, where their sentence is served, what action is taken. I think even people seeking sanctuary would say in those real public health and safety situations, it's appropriate to share. We ought never to do it in the everyday events that all the rest of us go through.
So real quickly, you would have state employees not cooperate with federal immigration authorities?
I would not, as sheriff, support this idea. On the question of sharing information from local traffic stops or local enforcement, I would not share that information with ICE, and local sheriffs who talk to them all around the state don't want it either. It's a waste of their time, it's a waste of their resources, and it's a waste of their personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
I will not let Donald Trump commandeer our local law enforcement to enforce a broken immigration law that divides families and hurts our country and makes us weaker. And we don't need to call ourselves or be a sanctuary anything to do that. It's the law today. Republican and Democratic sheriffs agree that it makes our communities more dangerous and increases crime if we let Donald Trump and Washington bureaucrats take control of our local law enforcement and tell them what to do.
Last week's road rage shooting in Westminster once again raises questions about mental health and guns. And it can leave some people feeling like there's nothing helping the situation right now. What would you do differently to address situations like this? And Carrie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, we're all heartbroken for that poor family in Westminster, and we have seen too many incidences of gun violence in our state and our nation that are taking innocent lives. Too often, it's our children who are the victims. In the incident in Westminster, I think Colorado should have had a red flag law. A law that would have alerted the authorities when someone is losing control and is a threat, is a risk to the safety and the health of others, someone who has serious mental illness. Their firearms should be able to be removed, and the background check when we sell people firearms also needs to include a mental health component. So I grew up with 3 brothers and sisters who joined my family through the foster care system. And my brothers and sisters had been victims of violence. And a couple of them were involved in the criminal justice system. And my family had to take action to prevent someone who we cared about because they became a threat. And we needed help. You have to be able to call the authorities and get help. We don't know all of the circumstances yet about the shooting in Westminster, but too often we see folks who commit these heinous crimes, have lost control, haven't been able to get the mental health treatment that they need, and the authorities haven't been able to intervene.
Thank you. I'm proud I'm the only one here who has actually taken on the NRA twice and won twice. I served in the state Senate and I helped pass both the background checks, universal background checks, as well as the high capacity magazine ban. I'm also the only one that's a gun owner and haven't owned guns my whole life. And so I think we agree on this question of getting red flag laws passed. The question is, who's going to show the kind of leadership to actually get this done? So rather than just sitting and wringing our hands on why we can't get it done, I took a different approach, which is I found the next quarterly meeting of the NRA up in Frisco, and I drove up there and I walked in the front door. And I started talking to NRA members about red flag laws and why, as a gun owner myself, I thought this was going to get done. And after talking to 3 or 4 of them, they all said, you know what, this is actually a reasonable proposal, and I can support this. And it turns out you actually get much farther by talking to people than by throwing bombs at them. And so I convened a dinner last week. We put together 5 or 6 NRA members. We put together survivors of school shootings. We put together teachers, mental health workers, military veterans. And by the end of that dinner, 100% of the people in that room said they would all work together to make sure we pass red flag laws before next April, which is the 20th anniversary of the Columbine school shooting. That's something I will get done in my first year as governor.
Thank you. Jared?
Look, the problem is not responsible gun owners. It's the gun manufacturing lobby or the NRA. The truth is the vast majority of gun owners support common sense gun safety reforms, support banning bump stocks to convert legal weapons into weapons that resemble the firing rate of illegal automatic weapons, support the Colorado red flag law that I support to put a mental health hold on people that might be a danger, and to make it harder for those who are under a restraining order in domestic abuse cases to access their guns. We need to move forward. As you indicated in the question, though, it's about gun safety, but it's also about mental health. I think we'll soon, hopefully, have a discussion about healthcare. I'm proud to support a universal healthcare model for Colorado to lead the way. Including mental health services has got to be a key piece of that. Of course, it's about safety in all regards. When we're talking about education, it's about making sure that our schools have the counselors we need to make sure that kids who are dealing with trauma or in a difficult situation are able to get the support that they might not have at home or to supplement their support at home to make sure that they're not posing a danger to their fellow students.
Thank you. Donna?
So I spent most of my life in healthcare and went back to school and got a doctorate in public health, and there is no question what's going on is a public health crisis. And we have to confront it that way. It's not about the gun owners. It is about what is provoking people to do some things that we think are socially not acceptable. And I think the first thing that I would do to answer your question is, as governor, is to declare that what we're experiencing now is in fact a health crisis, much like we have declared the opioid crisis as a health crisis. And part of that is identifying what's the root cause of the problem. What are we seeing here? And we do see more gun ownership in Colorado related to other kinds of incidents, like suicides, which is also a crisis in our state. And for me, bringing together primary care and mental health care is one solution. But the first thing is, as the governor did today on the immigration issue, is to call it a crisis and then begin to act.
Thank you. The State Board of Education Thursday considered comprehensive health standards for all students, guidelines for all grade levels to deal with issues like drug use and sex and violence, and one contentious issue came up for fourth graders, suggesting teachers ask students how the use of guns and other weapons can be positive. It did not go anywhere, but since all our candidates, all of you are parents, we want to know what you think would be an appropriate conversation to have with a fourth grader on the topic of guns.
Mike, I think we'll start with you.
Very apt question. I have 2 fourth graders in my home right now, so we have plenty of chances to practice. So I think that I think it's obviously appropriate to talk about gun safety with our kids. We have done that because we have guns in our homes. It's an important part of our life. I don't think that's something that the school needs to do. As we know right now, if you look around in Colorado, we don't mandate the curriculum for local school districts. What we do is set standards and allow schools to meet them. I think the State Board of Ed is having the wrong conversation about education. The conversation they ought to be having is what are we going to do to actually make sure we can fund our schools statewide and make sure we can pay our teachers what they deserve, so we don't have teachers that are making $29,000 a year as a first-year teacher, because we will not be able to keep the talent we need for the most important job in the state if we don't solve this fundamental crisis around school funding. So that is why the most important thing on my agenda is that I will lead the effort to go to the ballot in 2020 and make sure that we can actually repeal the worst parts of Tabor so we can fund our schools as well as our roads and bridges so we don't see a decade of declining investment in schools, which is the biggest risk our kids face right now.
You know, I served 6 years on the State Board of Education. I chaired a board equally divided between Republicans and Democrats, and part of what I tried to do and by and large accomplished during that tenure was avoid getting into these divisive issues. Of course the State Board of Ed and no government body should be telling people about the positive or negative features of guns. I trust responsible gun owners. I trust those who don't own guns in their household to tell their kids about safety considerations around gun ownership and safety. Look, we need to do more to make sure that all children in our state are safe. I haven't gotten to the fourth grade level yet. My kids are just 6 and 3. But you know, no parent should have to worry about the unthinkable happening when their kid goes to school. And it's important to have a discussion around how we can make sure that kids can be safe in school, making it harder to access weapons of war, converting legal guns into illegal weapons, and make sure that we have an honest discussion about the mental health resources that are available, particularly for families in need. So I think this discussion is not one that government should be pushing out in a particular propaganda effort to defend guns or attack guns. It's simply one that we should be having on the ground level with real data.
Thank you. Donna?
So I'm in a slightly different place because young people, whether they're 4th graders, 5th graders, or 6th graders or higher, are experiencing gun violence in the schools. They're experiencing gun violence and more focused on it, whether it's through the media or through social media. And I think it's an appropriate conversation to have to relieve some of the anxiety that young people are having. So I'm going to go back to what we're dealing with right now is a mental health crisis. And sometimes the schools are best suited to deal with that. You are more transparent often with a fellow student than you might be with your parents. The parents can exist in a different space. And so as long as we provide schools with the kind of support that they need to have those conversations with mental health counselors, not leave it to the teachers who have enough of a job to do, but it is an important place where we bring together a lot of human services to take care of young people.
Real quickly, Donna, if you believe that we ought to be having this conversation, in one line, real quickly here, what would you tell a 4th grader about gun violence?
I think we tell them that we're trying to make sure that they're safe in our schools. Reassurance is probably the first thing that young people need to feel and have, and also to be able to give them the freedom to talk about, I mean, at 4th grade they're a little early, but there are still some signs of mental behavior that need to be talked about and acknowledged, and fears and anxiety, and I think it sets a tone for the rest of a young person's development if they don't feel that there's a stigma attached attached to what they might be thinking.
Okay, same question for you. Would you tell a fourth grader guns are bad?
So my daughter's school, there was a shooting on the street outside last spring. And after the Parkland shooting, she came home and she said to me, "Mom, how did somebody my age buy an AR-15? How did they buy that gun?" So first, for the fourth grader, I would assure their safety, talk to them about the steps that we're taking, that school is a place where they can feel safe every single day. But in order for us to make good on that promise to our fourth graders, we have to ban military-style assault weapons. I tell my children the vast majority of gun owners in our country, in our state, are law-abiding citizens. They use their guns for law-abiding purposes, but there is no place on our streets for these weapons of war that are designed to kill as many people as possible in as short a period of time as possible.
And would you all ban assault weapons? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. We are here at the University of Denver, so let's talk higher education. This next question will be for you, Jared. Colorado ranked the 4th lowest in spending on higher education per student in 2017. Would you support a freeze in college tuition and increase state funding, or what else would you do to help take the tuition burden off of Colorado families?
I'm glad you asked, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for hosting this very important debate for voters to make an informed decision. The costs of college are getting out of hand for many families, and it's happening at the same time that for really a degree or some type of certificate or skill above a diploma in high school is more important than ever before to be able to support yourself and your family. And so it's getting harder at the time that it's more important than ever before. I'm very excited about dual and concurrent enrollment programs where kids can earn associate's degrees while they're in high school, even if it means they stay a 5th year in high school at no cost to them. They can graduate with a skill that helps them get a job, or if they go on to a 4-year university and transfer, they only need 2 years to complete. Of course, we need more state funding, particularly targeted at bringing down tuition for in-state students at our public universities. And nationally, I propose replacing this Republican corporate tax giveaway with forgiving student loans and making students college more affordable going forward. It shows our priorities. Education, both preschool through 12th grade, as well as higher education, should truly be our priority in Colorado.
To the question, would you support a tuition freeze?
Well, as you know, the governor, the Board of Regents of CU is independently elected. The governor appoints the Board of Regents at CSU. I would like to see tuitions come down, and that would come out of increased state funding. So if we can work with the legislature to get more funding, I would love to be a governor that can deliver on tuition decreases for the first time in my memory.
Donna, same question.
So I think we have a couple of problems. First of all, we have what we call an attainment gap in Colorado. We don't have enough people who have degrees. But we have, I think, something even more serious, which is an equity gap. We are not educating young people of color, and we need to make sure that we're doing that. We import many of our college graduates from other states. I was part of the Higher Education Funding Task Force, which looked at outcomes and trying to give more money to colleges that have positive outcomes, and I think we need to tweak that so that we're actually looking at performance. On the freeze issue, I think absolutely, if we could freeze tuition for those schools that actually are graduating, particularly more students of color, and they're doing it in a shorter period of time, and they're supporting them, I think that's the way we target the rewards to those universities and link it to careers. Business plays an important role in linking with universities because at the end of the day, we do want people to have jobs.
Thank you for answering the question, Carrie.
Yes, I would support freezing tuition for in-state students trying to go to college here in Colorado. We have one of the top economies in the country, and we rank at the bottom in our investment in education. That includes higher education. We are 3rd last nationally in our support for covering the cost of kids attending in-state college, our public colleges and universities. And there's a reason for this, John. It's because for the last 15 years we've been cutting our investments in education because of our Tabor Amendment. And I will lead as governor to pass permanent reform here in our state so we can adequately and equitably fund our education system. It includes funding higher education. We've cut the state's investment in half in the last 15 years. That's all been pushed onto our students. They just simply can't afford the tuition. So an awful lot of kids growing up in our state aren't going on to higher education, and the ones that aren't finishing because they can't afford the cost.
You talk about removing the cap on Tabor spending. If we were to remove that cap, there's no pot of gold money at the end for the state of Colorado. In fact, we are below the cap right now and are projected to be for the near future. So where would that money actually come from?
Yeah, John, I always say the first rule of holes is if you're in one, stop digging. We're third from the bottom in funding higher education. We rank at the bottom in funding K-12 education. We have one of the most dynamic and innovative and fastest growing economies in the country. I see too often businesses here in our state, when they go to fill their high-skilled, high-paid jobs, they're recruiting from outside of Colorado. Some are recruiting from Pueblo and Trinidad. We need to invest in our education system so that the kids growing up in our state can benefit from the great progress that we're seeing here.
Mike, how would you take the tuition burden off of families?
Let me answer both of the questions. First is, I have supported tuition caps in the past, but here's why they don't solve the problem, which is right now what's happening is you're cutting more and more state resources to schools. And so what they're doing is increasing tuition just to stay even with the total amount of revenue they need to operate because the state's cutting revenue. So if you cut state revenue and increase tuition, there's simply not enough dollars to run a university anymore. And so that's why what you have to do is actually reinvest dollars to the state level if you want to match then tuition free. So I would say yes, cap tuition after you've actually put the state support in, and we have to allow those schools to grow. But the longer term question is this is more than just how we get students to four-year universities. What we know is that we're in the most rapidly changing economy in American history. And there are going to be industries that disappear overnight, which means you are at age 28 or 38 or 48, you're going to have to move from one career to the next. And that's going to require new skills. So that's why I, as governor, put in place the Colorado Promise, which would allow you at any stage of your career to get up to 2 years of skills training or community college debt-free in exchange for providing service to the state. Nothing's free in Colorado, but you got to work for it. If you work for it, there should be opportunity there. And that's what's going to have to be our broader vision of public education as a lifetime investment, because people are going to have to get lots of new skills for new jobs.
You want to put more money toward higher education. Where does it come from?
So thank you. Your second question on the Tabor change, which is, I propose going to the ballot in 2020 to repeal the cap on Tabor. That means it would come into effect in 2021. If we continue the economic growth we're seeing at this stage, by that year you will see the state will hit the Tabor cap and will start generating about $400 million in revenue that would come back to Colorado in year one. I would invest that in both paying our school teachers, putting $100 million into pay school teachers, expanding full-day kindergarten statewide, and closing the preschool gap. I also support that we're going to have to solve the transportation problem with a dedicated resource, which will make sure if transportation is solved separately, you can actually invest these dollars we need most in human infrastructure, which is going to be K-12 and higher ed. I think that we know if we don't invest in those two things, our people and our roads and bridges, we're going to see this as a place where businesses don't want to come anymore or don't want to grow.
Thank you. I think we need to get our other two candidates in on this Tabor issue. So, Jarrett, you first.
Sure. I support structural reform to Tabor. That would include any of the ratchet down effect or allowing revenues above the caps to be utilized. But we can't afford to wait until Tabor reform is done to make the investments we need to make today in providing every child the opportunity to go to preschool and kindergarten, ending decades of underinvestment in our public schools so we can pay teachers better and reduce class size. And making higher education more affordable, as well as building out a 21st century infrastructure to help Colorado succeed, including rural broadband and connectivity. Infrastructure isn't just about moving people in cars, it's also about moving bits and bytes of information. It's also about new multimodal forms of transportation. One of our proposals is front range rail, Pueblo to Fort Collins. So while we talk about Tabor reform, which I certainly support, let's make sure we can also build a coalition today with the business community, Republicans and Democrats and independents to get the resources we need to keep our state competitive and growing.
And Dawn.
Thank you so much. Sometimes when you're the person who actually answers questions directly and stays within the time limit, you get penalized. So thanks for giving me an extra minute to answer that question. So I know this budget pretty well. I've been working on it for the last more than 2 years. And you know, how we measure and perform in the state is tied exactly to our budget. We have to address a couple of things. We will hit the Tabor cap probably 2 years from now, and we're going to have to refund money, and I will work to repeal that refund mechanism. That's important. But you raise an important question. What are the choices, and how are we going to make them? Because depending on which group you talk to, We've underinvested in higher ed, we've underinvested in K-12, we've underinvested in transportation. I do think we have a solid transportation initiative on the ballot right now, as well as a general fund increase, and I'm proposing a $100 million increase in child care credits that will deal with some of our most need before we take on the hard work, I think, in 2020 to get a strong education initiative passed.
Thank you all. We are going to take a break, as promised, a 3.5-minute break. We will continue on Denver 7. And please, for those of you watching, please send me your questions on Facebook. We will allow the candidates to take a break here and be right back.